Hope all of you listening are doing well. Today we have on two guests, as you can see, Liquity from Liquity, Bojan, who's the head of business development over there, and also Sam, who's the head of growth over there. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for having us. Excited to answer some of the questions that come our way.
Yeah, all good here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so, before we get into it, could you guys give us a quick rundown on the protocol and why you guys chose to build on Ethereum?
Yeah, sure. I can give it a shot. Yeah, so I think one of the first things that people should know is that we as a team, we're a team of 10, and all of us are pretty big on decentralization, as you can see from the protocol level as well. We have been around now for over 2 years. We have issued over $4 billion in loans. We're ranked by number 12. We're ranked number 12 by TVL on Ethereum. We just believe in the Ethereum roadmap. We believe that, decentralization needs to be put on the same pedestal as some of the other protocols and some of the other people do for scalability. We really, with the recent news of USDC, USDT, I think that is probably more relevant than ever. And, it goes to show that it really does matter when you have like censorship resistant assets and censorship resistant protocols that can stand the test of time. We'll probably talk a little bit more later on about, immutability and the good and bads that come with that. But yeah, I think for us, what we wanted to build from the start was a protocol that had no centralization vectors, or as minimal as possible, had no governance, and was completely immutable, just so that it could give people the predictability when they borrow against their assets, right? So essentially, we believe that DeFi should empower individuals, where it should be trustless, where you're protected from human greed. It should be transparent, where you benefit from a level playing field. It should be predictable as well, where you should not expect any surprises, no multi-sigs, nothing like that. And it should also be permissionless, where you can't be restricted from any access or be kicked out. So I think those are all values that Ethereum has as well, compared to some of the other blockchains in the space. And I think that along with choosing Ether as collateral, as the most trustless collateral out there, made us build on Ethereum.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. So, following up on that, you already touched on some of the qualities that the protocol embodies. You also talked about the why. Maybe we could also talk about some of these qualities more in depth, and maybe even the bad side of them.
Yeah, that's quite a broad question, but I'll give it a shot. So, as you said, being immutable and decentralized to such a degree as Liquidity is, has positive sides and also has negative sides. If I just or quickly touch upon both of them, so the positives are, of course, assurance of users that nothing can happen, that things as they are known, they will continue to be as they are. There are many or much less attack factors because no changes can be made to the protocol. Lately, or since for the last years, we saw quite a lot of attacks via governance upgrades and updates and similar loopholes, so to say. We do not have any of those. But then, of course, if you deploy a protocol into the wild without having any means to change anything about it, then you can't really react to changing market conditions, macro conditions, trends, whatever. So we can't add new collateral types, we can't increase or reduce the interest rates, etc., etc. So it's uh, yeah, mixed bag, so to say. But because we wanted to embrace the Ethereum ethos of code is law and to build um, products which are, how should I put it, algorithmically governed or governed by math only, we decided to go with the immutable way, so to say.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that leads into the next question. I mean, you guys clearly embraced immutability to the highest degree. But I mean, a recent study done actually by Exponential DeFi actually showed that most of the biggest protocols by TVL, um, around two-thirds actually, are fully upgradable by a multi-sig, which is actually usually controlled by the core team. I mean, this puts not only user funds in danger, it just opens up centralization vectors. And I mean, the worst part is, that users, either investors or depositors, they're not even aware of this. I mean, what are your guys' takes on this? And like, why do you think most protocols are set up like this?
I can give it a shot. I think most protocols, when the reason why they have these multi-sigs and upgrades in place is so that I think there's a fear within the space, right? That, they might go obsolete, or, by having an immutable protocol, you are running the risk of having, doing something that you can't change unless you create a whole new protocol by itself. I think by having these parameters where they can change stuff, they have that ability to remain relevant and to achieve, I would say, scale at an easier level than compared to someone like us, where, we built a protocol that was immutable from the start. There's also, certain challenges and mitigations that they're doing by having these upgrades, right? So some things that you need to think about when we created Liquity at the time was that, there was no staked ether. Ether was the only trustless collateral that we thought of, that we feel would stand the test of time. And we we did it with the risk that, there might be a situation where we might be outcompeted or become obsolete. But other protocols, by having the upgrades, they can essentially add whatever collateral type they want. They can achieve scale in a way, and it allows them to overcome some of these challenges that come with obsolescence. One is also rigid crypto economics. Let's say if they have tokenomics that are economic decisions that they may have made at the start that are that need to be changed or adjusted, they can also do that. And these can be in the form of, a good example is interest rates, and charging a one-time fee, stuff like that as well, that some of these protocols may value at a higher level. And also, I guess, there's also a degree of difficulty when you launch an immutable protocol compared to something that can be upgraded in the form of bugs or hacks, right? So if it's an immutable protocol, you can't patch it if it's out there, and if it has some issues. It is what it is. It's an ossified product. While with having governance and having upgradability means that, you can deploy patched versions if needed. You can pause certain things if you need to as well. So I guess, it's a combination of all these different factors, a combination of trying to be relevant, trying to guard against bugs and hacks, I feel, and also adjusting crypto economics as we go. Yeah, that's my take, at least.
So to just add to that shortly, I think that people in general do not care much about decentralization. I think currently 80% of crypto value is still on centralized exchanges. And I don't know, I'm just guessing, like maybe 5%, 10%, even less than 10% in my opinion, of the users really embrace decentralization, only use such protocols, etc., etc. Maybe then 10% have knee-jerk reactions when USDC depegs and similar events. But to be honest, people don't really care. Otherwise, they would demand to to use only immutable code and tamper-resistant protocols, which is not happening. So that's that.
Yeah, it's a bit like privacy where people aren't really bothered until they actually need it, I guess, to some degree. So on that same point, I just have a question in terms of where do you think, if there is a line, obviously you guys have designed Liquity without this aspect of governance, but if for anybody listening who is thinking of obviously implementing governance in their protocol, do you think there is a line between what can be influenced and what cannot be influenced, or obviously you're going to stick to your guns and just say no, no governance all the way?
Well, I am not necessarily against governance. I think it has its place and can be implemented in smart ways or progressive ways. But I think it should be limited to as what it can do. Then there's also the problem of what's the right word? The power of the wealthy. What's the English word? It slips my mind right now.
Plutocratic, or
exactly. Thank you very much. So if you have enough coins, then you can influence the protocol in whichever way you like. So it's just a charade. So similar as our political system and quasi-democracy anyway, but that's a different topic. So,
but I guess like if sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on.
No, I just want to say that especially if protocols get really complicated with a lot of layers and interwoven parts, because Liquity is rather simple, just 5,000 lines of code. And the more complicated you get, the more difficult it is not to govern it in some way. So I think it's feasible to govern, but only in limited ways.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like if you do have this sandbox in which governance can only affect certain things, and then there are other things that can't, I guess you're limiting the plutocratic nature of somebody who's trying to influence, like you can better align those who are involved in governance with, I guess, what the protocol wants is what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, I agree, right? If you have a simple product, then maybe it isn't needed whatsoever, and you've got obviously ranges that cover certain conditions. So I think in Liquity's case, it is it's a good implementation. Sorry, go ahead. Imagine with your next question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very valuable conversation you guys just had, and that really, thing that really brings out, I think, Robert Cialdini's quote, where he says, centralization doesn't matter until it does. And I mean, right now, clearly, DeFi probably maybe should even be put in air quotes because, it is not very decentralized right now. And I think users don't really care about decentralization right now. So do you think that this is something DeFi users would kind of embrace over time?
I think as the crowd gets smarter and they start, I do believe that there's a baptism of fire that some of the crowd has to go through, be it through, pain points that they learn through and, understanding the importance of decentralization. I think the incentives would need to align, if I'm being honest, at the end of the day. If the APRs on a governance minimized product or an immutable product matches their risk appetite, then they will use it. But as I said earlier, I think it also their own experience in using different DeFi products and getting rugged or whatever it is, that's how I think some of the users will learn. I think actually one positive that we do see, like, LUSD supply, for example, in the last 6 months has gone up quite a bit compared to some of our competitors. And there's no direct correlation that we can make with, the USDC, USDT tornado cash debacles, but I'm pretty sure that did play a role. So you are seeing some demand come that way where people are understanding the risks of centralization vectors, but it's still a long way to go, right? But so, yeah, I think as long as incentives match the risk profile that they have, and I think that should eventually lead to more and more users caring about it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that actually is a good segue to our next question. And I mean, the next question is, why would you think that someone would use Liquity over some of the other collateralized deposition protocols like Maker, some other LSD-Fi protocols that we've been seeing a lot lately? Are the inherent qualities of the protocol, that you guys have elucidated, enough of an incentive for someone to use Liquity?
First, you have to have the economic attractiveness sorted out. And we kind of did that with the no interest and just 0.5% borrowing fee, and also the better capital efficiency, so lower collateralization rate compared to Maker. So those are two big improvements compared to Maker. And this is what got us the initial surge of users, I think at least. And then as people start to get into the protocol, start to experience it and talk about it on Twitter, as time passes and there are no security issues, I know weird behaviors of any sort by the team or people around it, then your pedigree grows as the protocol basically performs in the wild as expected. This is all backwind to you as a protocol, and like Uniswap, why they have 50% of the market share, because they just deliver since years and years, and everything works as expected. And this is pretty much the same with Liquity. We started out with just good conditions, borrowing conditions, and now adding with this pedigree that I mentioned, and with an expanding LUSD ecosystem, because in the end, every stablecoin lives and dies by the ecosystem it is able to create, and we are working hard to expand it. So I'm very positive of the future for Liquity.
Just to add to that as well, I think over the next week, some protocols in the space are actually increasing their interest rate. We'll have a thread coming out on that soon, but essentially, I think Liquity starting next week to borrow against Ether on the same collateralization ratio compared to MakerDAO becomes 7.5x cheaper to borrow using Liquity compared to MakerDAO, and that is only accounting for the first interest rates over the next few years. That will probably get even more and more the gap between the two, considering Liquity's one-time borrow fee, right? So I think there's that. I think the battle testedness of Liquity as well, along with the economic incentives of the 0.5%. We've now been through pretty much every crash there is, from UST to 3AC through Black Thursday to, not Black Thursday, sorry, the May 19 crash, the China banning Bitcoin crash. We've been through so many different situations, and the liquidations were handled seamlessly by the system. I think that speaks for something. Some of these forks that have come out, I've already seen some have changed their loan to value ratios within a couple of weeks of launching. Some still have quite a lot of centralization vectors within it, like multi-sigs and whatnot. So I think, all in all, like if you're borrowing against Ether, like for trustlessness and for decentralization, there's not much better than Liquity, economically speaking, and also on the security side.
Yeah, so I guess to sum up, you guys still have sound economics in place, to make borrowing on your platform, I guess, attractive. And kind of while we're on the topic of competitors and stablecoins, do you see a future where there are many types of stablecoins, and like what role do you see LUSD playing in it?
I think I read a while ago that, I don't know who posted it, but the basic premise was that there will be many, many hundreds, if not thousands, stablecoins, be it back to this and that and everything. And then there will be just a handful of settlement stablecoins, so the big ones, which I find quite a plausible scenario. Where LUSD would fit in is rather hard to say because that depends a bit on ETH's future as well. But I think we have a pretty good standing to grow our market share, especially now with things like Sam mentioned that Maker is increasing the borrowing fee and similar topics around the forks. So yeah, I think there will be many stablecoins, and we will do our best that LUSD will become among the biggest.
Sam, is there anything you wanted to add on to that?
No, I think as long as Ether, my view is that as long as Ether grows, LUSD will also grow. And I think with CDPs that are based around ETH or stablecoins that are based around ETH, I think that's just how the market will trend. And for us, yeah, I think the fact that we've been around for a few years now, that we at our peak were over $1 billion in supply as well, I think that goes to show that when if ETH does go up, then LUSD as well will trend upwards.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. And so my next question would be, are there any use cases for LUSD currently that result in it being used as a medium of exchange on chain or even in the real world?
So I can answer the real world aspect of it. So that's a very good question. I think one thing we're trying to build as much as possible is utility and usage of LUSD in the real world. We have a couple of integrations with some crypto cards. There is one with Holy Held where you can use your LUSD on either Optimism, Arbitrum, or Ethereum. You can use the debit card that they have. They have both a physical debit card and also a crypto card, and you can spend that LUSD in real life. So that's actually a very good use case for LUSD, where you just hold it on chain and use the actual funds for your day-to-day expenses. I believe that card currently is only available in the EU, and I think they plan to expand into Latin America in the near future as well. We do have a couple of other on and off ramps. One of the biggest ones that we work with or who have integrated us is called Mount Pelerin, where you can off ramp LUSD into, I think they have eight or nine currencies that they support, where you can just off ramp LUSD. And one of the cool things is they support LUSD on Arbitrum, Optimism, and Ethereum. So if you want less gas fees, etc., and you have funds on one of the two layer twos, then you could off ramp through there as well. And yeah, we're trying to partner with or have conversations with all these different on and off ramps, more on the global south. I think in Europe, we have got a couple of these who have covered it, but I think for us, it's also about reaching a broader audience in the likes of India, in the likes of Southeast Asia, East Asia, Latin America, and trying to grow the usage of LUSD, because I think those are the places where, if you think about it, like the need for LUSD is more than ever due to a myriad of reasons: inflation, censorship, and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the demand for stable coins, especially on chain, where in nations where the government is oppressive and there's just overall economic and political turmoil, it's just needed, US dollars on chain. And I think LUSD is a prime example of a provider of such a service. And jumping back onto the topic of utilities, you mentioned there being stuff to do with LUSD and optimism, Arbitrum, and I mean, as you said, if LUSD wants to gain adoption, it needs to have real world utility as well as, on chain utility. And I mean, on chain right now, there's a lot of stuff to do with LUSD and optimism and Arbitrum, but then, it LUSD needs to be bridged and also needs to be, I guess, located on other chains. Do you think this a center through the bridge and the chain itself?
Sorry, I lost you for the last few seconds of that question. I think the signal kind of broke. Can you repeat that?
No, my question was basically whether the fact.
I think you asked if bridged LUSD on Arbitrum and Optimism is more centralized because of the multi-sig setup of those L2s. I think
Yeah, sorry,
the
I think
answer
I
is
think I got cut off. I was
yes.
just asking whether LUSD being bridged to optimism and Arbitrum comes with it some centralized.
Yeah, I think I got the gist of the answer of the question. Sorry. So I think the answer is yes, but not in any more than any other token used on those L2s. So it's not really a LUSD specific problem, but industry problem, so to say, which those L2s need to solve. If someone is concerned with that LUSD is on those chains, then they can of course hold it on Ethereum only, and that's a solution to this problem pretty much.
I think on that front as well, I've been actually quite impressed with how Arbitrum relatively quickly have kind of moved a little bit more into a trustless model. I think the rollup is obviously fully open source. They have established governance, and you can talk about the token distribution. That's another conversation in itself. I think their bridge also has like rate limiting, automated rate limiting and circuit breakers. I think their fraud proofs and validity proofs are also live and permissionless now. Before they used to have a white list of fraud provers. If I can't remember the sequencer aspect of it, the sequencer aspect of it still needs to be sorted, but they are already doing a couple of things that they've changed from when they first launched. So on their side, I think for layer 2 they've moved quite quickly. So yeah, I think there are some risks obviously with some of these layer 2s, but I think we are seeing that the teams are making an effort to decentralize as much as they can. And at the end of the day, it's a very limited supply of LUSD that are on these layer 2s as well. So yeah, we feel that the positives of LUSD being on the hands of layer 2, where smaller users can still use it and hold it, I think outweighs the risks that some of the centralization vectors that these layer 2s have pose.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I got cut off a little. I caught the end of that. Think we can move on to the next question. I mean, I think let's get back to design choices. So we did kind of cover, the pros and cons of immutability and governance minimization. But do you think builders in this market environment and should kind of prioritize immutability and governance minimization? I mean, what do you think some factors are that builders should consider when deciding on these aspects?
I mean, in the end of the day, people can do whatever they want to do. If you want to live up to the cryptography ethos, which was laid out already decades ago, then yeah, you should try to be code is law as much as possible. But in the end, as I said, people can do whatever they want to do. I think we first need to fix the security option, the UI UX option, account abstractions and similar to onboard new users, because if they are not safe, or if they think the script is too complicated, then we won't do much progress. Then we'll just play around in our sandbox and take money from each other, so to say, in a circle. Yeah, in the end of the day, I would love to see more decentralization, more resilience, because looking from a more macro perspective, there seems to be more repression and less freedom on the horizon as a society. It seems that people in power would like to have more power and more control. And in that regard, if we are using a more resilient and more self-sufficient financial system, which DeFi is a part of, that's just good. So hoping for the best, but not expecting too much, to be honest.
Just so on that same point, Sam mentioned at the beginning, obviously, when you guys were deciding upon the collateral type, you couldn't foresee the LSD narrative, right? And I guess my question is, do you feel that it's probably better for a new protocol? Because I guess in the case of like a parallel universe where Liquity did have some governance aspect to it, you could have adapted, right, and sort of tried to capture more market share that way in terms of this new narrative that's popped up. But do you feel that it's probably better for new protocols to try and capture that or fill that gap, rather than, let's say, in this parallel universe, Liquity trying to adapt and maybe compromising on its decentralization?
Yeah, I can help answer that. I would, on a personal standpoint, I think so. I think you can also see with some of the numerous forks that have come out, they've actually managed to get TVL relatively quickly, and I think that can be attributed to the 4 to 5% that they can get on staked Ether or Rocket Pool Ether or whatever it is. But I think one of the challenges that these products will face, although they've launched now, and I think they've quickly managed to get TVL, is over time, I do foresee that some of the staked Ether derivatives still have some scalability challenges that they need to overcome. I think Rocket Pool up until recently still had they reduced their, if you were to run a node on Rocket Pool, I think they reduced from 16 to 8, and I think it's right now 8, but then in the future they might reduce it to 4, and I think there's still some scalability challenges that come with some of these other alternatives that are not Lido Ether. So I think that will definitely be a challenge that I'll be interested to see. It'll be interesting to see how some of these other protocols overcome that. But to answer your question, I think, right now, as you can clearly see, there is a demand for staked derivative Ether, and if you're building something from the ground up, I would probably say, that's probably the better way to go, because you've already now seen that the withdrawals have been processed pretty easily. You can see that the entry and exit queue of the validators, it's quite a bit more geared towards entering rather than exiting. So like all the tailwinds that you're seeing are towards moving into staked Ether and accepting that as collateral. So over time, I would expect that market will grow,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think I'm generally more so on that side too. I guess one, like, to push back on that to some extent, if you are an LQTY holder, to some degree, you have like an investment there, so to speak, right? And if the protocol can adapt, and again, like within this context of some form of governance sandbox, which probably makes most sense, then I guess you can expect probably a stronger holder base to some degree, i.e. it's being more of a solid investment because it can be a bit more adaptable for unforeseen changes, obviously, down the road. But yeah, generally speaking, I think I agree with your point. So
Yeah, and I mean, moving on from that, I mean, we know that Liquity is not a DAO, right? But the core contributors are, still working on the protocol and are based all around the world. Similar, I mean, similar to what we see in many of the DAOs. I mean, could you talk a little more about the culture at Liquity and some of the advantages and drawbacks of this remote work setting, especially in the crypto space? I'm sure aspiring builders would love to hear about this.
It is very similar to any other startup which is remote and has a distributed workspace. We are, as Sam mentioned at the beginning, of a very small team, just 10 people, and everyone on the team has been with the team for at least a year. So when someone joins, they don't really leave. So we have a rather flat hierarchy. There is, of course, a CEO and there are founders, but usually, since everyone is pretty senior, they are just doing their own work to the best of their capabilities, and everyone knows what role they have to play and just execute on that. We use the standard tools for communication like Slack and Google Docs and similar. And we don't have too many calls or meetings. We have just a bi-weekly, so twice a month team meeting. And then we might have some specific meetings between the devs and between the BizDev people. But even that is maybe one per week. So not too much overhead in terms of meeting and reporting and all of that. We haven't really seen any necessity for that. But then if you have, of course, a big team, you have to have task managers and project managers and people overseeing other people. But since also because of the mutability for protocol, we don't have to have that many, I don't know, dev relations or project managers or additional devs, UI, UX people. We can keep things pretty flat, pretty small and efficient. So yeah, I would say it's closer to a startup remote setup than to a DAO, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Sam, is there anything you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, I'd say I'd echo whatever Bojan said. I think it's more of a startup. It feels more like a startup rather than a DAO setup. We overlap a couple of hours. We get stuff done. It's very meeting minimizations, kind of like governance minimization, which is good. And I mean, to still keep that human touch and stuff, we do meet up once every 6 months, 12 months at some of these events and whatnot as well. And we use that opportunity to have like a team retreat of sorts. After ETH Denver, we all met up in Istanbul, so we try to do that at least once a year, sometimes a little bit more, maybe once every 8-9 months or so. So yeah, it's a very independent kind of culture where you're expected to get stuff done, and there's no like micromanaging or micro reporting, and it's all out in the open, which is quite great.
Yeah, seems to me like a very efficient way to go about it. Mason, would you want to follow up?
I just want, so because that like echoes quite well, I guess, what more of a principal would look like in a business rather than an agent, like an employee, right? And I guess it's taking on this ethos of that you care much more about what you're working on versus just doing the work and getting paid. And I guess my question sort of is around like the compensation that you guys have in working with Liquity. From what I understand, it is the token, right? The token LP2I is the form of compensation that you get, and then that, I guess, first of all, is that correct?
The compensation, when we are talking about salaries, funded 100% by the funding rounds that we had. So we had 2 rounds, and everyone on the team is paid via that. So fiat salaries, normal fiat salaries, and we still have a very healthy runway. So I think at least 2 years of runway with that team, just via fiat allocations, just via the funding that we received. But of course, there is the token, and of course, the team received some tokens, and there are some tokens reserved for new team members, etc., etc. So that's just like equity in a company, and that is on top of the fiat funding that we have.
I see. Okay. No, brilliant. Yeah. Carry on, imagine.
Yeah. Coming towards the end, but I mean, I guess I kind of wanted to kind of listen to your long-term vision, you know, like where do you guys see Liquity in, 10 years? I mean, right now, DeFi, as you guys previously mentioned, you know, it's developing at a groundbreaking rate, you know, with new applications and use cases being released by the day. It's probably a new LUSD 5 project probably being released every day. And I mean, through all of this, do you think Liquity will always have a place in DeFi?
Yeah, I think so. I personally think that there will always be a demand for people who just want to hold vanilla Ether and borrow against it and take on zero centralization risk. Even with staked Ether, you still have, you know, all these different LSD providers, and some of the trust assumptions are still there. I personally see, you know, the immutability of Liquity being a very fascinating value point for a lot of users. And I foresee that as long as Ether grows, I still think that there will be a lot of people who value using LUSD, and even just maybe just depositing it in the stability pool and DCAing on ETH as we go as well. So personally, I still always think that there'll be a demand for vanilla ETH. So in that regard, I think as long as that grows, LUSD will always have a place in DeFi as well.
Yeah, think Liquity will always, you know, provide this kind of service. You know, it might not be playing the narratives of today, you know, but we still need a protocol like that, especially when DeFi matures. And I mean, onto the last question that I have before we can move on to your questions. Is there any advice that you'd give builders? Because you know you have launched 2 years ago, as you said, and any regrets that you have, you know, we'd love to hear them, because you know now there's nothing really that you can do about it, you know, considering the immutable nature. So is there any advice or takeaways that you'd like to share with aspiring builders?
Out of the top of my head, considering that DeFi is really innovative and a lot of interesting primitives came out in the last 3-4 years, I think that we cannot expect that every new protocol will be groundbreaking, and I see nothing wrong with taking good ideas and kind of changing them, improving them, combining them to offer users something new, something more, I don't know, even just gas efficient or easier to navigate or having a better UI. All of that is fair game in my opinion. So there's no issue in combining or reusing things that other people built. But then just plain forks, just changing the token name or adding a collateral, that doesn't make much sense. And looking only at Liquity forks, you see that none of them is around anymore, as far as I know. Some of them lasted months, some of them lasted a year, but that's about it. So you need to offer something more than just like the recent trend, LSD as a collateral. Apart from that, if possible, build products which have good UI, good UX, which are very secure, and just have a certain product market fit. Otherwise, you won't survive.
Yeah, great points from Bojan there. I think on the builder side of things, when they do build, my advice or comment would be that, limit the scope of governance if you can. Have some sort of like time lock built into it or a time decay built into it where, after a certain time, the protocol can't be changed and that level of predictability will always be there. Also with the time lock, maybe also consider having some sort of no retroactive use case built into the code where, and governance decisions only affect new users and not existing users, and existing users can still like rage quit if they don't like some of the new things that are built into their protocol. I would say also for the governance, if they do end up having governance, by limiting the scope, like only being able to change certain functions while the core contracts cannot be changed, I also recommend having some sort of thing like that. And obviously also have less politics and more game theory built into the governance if they do go down that path where it's less smart medianizers, some gauge voting to distribute rewards, where it's a bit different to what you have today, where a lot of things can be done with just vote buying and having a lot of tokens. So just kind of building some game theory aspect of that into the protocol.
Yeah. So with that comment you made in terms of like time-bound governance, were you referring to like Rise on governance process that they have?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the few governance processes that I like quite a lot. Exactly the example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it from me. I think we can move on to viewer questions. If anyone from the audience has any questions, feel free to put up a request. And yeah, I'm sure Bojan and Sam would love to answer your questions.
Not all at once. Okay, so I guess I'll go then. I've got a good question. So, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, LQTY's like utility is to obviously reap some form of revenue share in terms of the whatever revenue that Liquity makes from the borrowing fees and redemption fees. Was there a point in time where you were considering to not have a token? Because I guess the system could work without a token, right?
I don't remember ever considering not having a token, but I did see quite a few ideas over the years on Twitter or discussions around deploying or the option to deploy Liquity without a fork. I guess it's doable. Yeah, but I don't think it was ever discussed internally. I don't remember the token idea or that there will be a token has been around since started, or at least since when I joined. So that's what I can say.
Yeah. So I guess like phrased in a different way, what is the explicit benefit? Obviously, revenue share is brilliant, right? I mean, that's a given. But like the benefit of having a token for Liquity in your guys' view? What do you reckon it is?
I mean, apart from the revenue share, it's like any other token. If you think that the developments of the protocol will be positive in the long term, then owning the token should increase your or improve your investment. That's like with any token.
Yeah, I agree. Asset appreciation, right? I mean, and to be honest, I think the
Exactly.
simplicity of it makes sense, right? It's not multifaceted where you're trying to cover like a shit ton of utility just to try and, yeah, I guess you could say garner demand for it. It is just there for like two purposes, literally, which makes it easy to understand too. So,
I mean, we are discussing other use cases for LPTY, be it as collateral or auto compounding or similar, but that will be live and it will be live. So it's not a prime focus of ours. So, but it is being worked on.
yeah. No, that's great because I think a lot of projects sort of fall back on the crux of governance as the utility. And obviously, in your case, you can't, right? And that sort of then results in either utility having a bit more of a solid ground, right? Where it does have because like this typical thing where people say, yeah, worthless governance token, right? And that makes sense because there's just no alignment between whoever is voting and what you can vote on, right? But obviously, if you remove all of that, then yeah, you've got a stronger use case for whatever utility you do sort of implement.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we said earlier, many of those tokens are just plutocracy. So if you own a few tokens, I mean, what can you do? We saw recently that there was a proposal, I don't know where, and it was close to passing, and then one VC, I don't know which, came around and they just voted against it, and that's it. So I don't see much utility in a governance token or in the option or the possibility to govern something. It's just in theory, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in many cases it's just like it is used as some form of crux, right? And especially in terms of like trying to not be considered a security. I guess that's the use case of many protocols. But yeah, great. So that was a great answer. Does anybody have any questions from the public?
Yeah, I think we covered everything then. Well, I think this is a good breaking point. I mean, thanks for all the great answers, Bojan and Sam. I'm personally very excited to see what happens next with Liquity, and yeah, I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. And also,
Yeah,
one
sure.
thing I just want to kind of give a shout out as well. I think Imagine has written quite a good do I call it blog post or research post on Liquity, LUSD, LQTY, a complete deep dive. Do check it out as well. I think I gave it a read a few days ago and it was quite informative.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. Thanks for the kind words. I think we'll definitely be linking that on the post below.
Yeah, and if you don't follow yet Liquity on Twitter, there will be some interesting announcements in the coming weeks and months. So don't miss it.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for your time, and hope everybody enjoyed. And yeah, stay tuned.
See you guys.
See you guys. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.